imagine, if you will, stepping into this really quiet, almost idyllic rural world, far from the city buzz. Generations farming the same land, communities super tight-knit. Now, what if I told you that exact place, that quiet landscape, was secretly home to the biggest domestic marijuana operation in U.S. history? Yeah, we're talking about a homegrown syndicate called the Cornbread Mafia. So today, that's our deep dive. We're digging into this fascinating Kentucky group. We'll be looking at excerpts from the Cornbread Mafia, Kentucky's Cannabis Syndicate, presented by Nug Notes. Trying to unpack the, well, frankly surprising facts and a pretty remarkable story of how they got so big. Our goal, to figure out how this mix of culture, place, and sheer ambition in rural Kentucky let this empire just bloom. Okay, let's get into this incredible story. So it all starts in the hills of central Kentucky. We're talking Marion, Nelson, and Washington counties. Picture these places, definitely not cities. These are really close-knit Catholic farm towns. Families living there for generations, Life tied to the land, strong community, shared faith. A place where everyone knows everyone, and outsiders. Well, they really stood out.
And what's really insightful here, I think, is that this environment wasn't just like empty ground waiting for crime. No, this region had a deep history, almost romanticized sometimes, of moonshine production. That history basically gave them a ready-made playbook for illegal activity. You had generations who knew clandestine cultivation, how to use the land, hide things, manage plants, and crucially, there were already underground distribution routes, sort of, and this deeply ingrained code of silence. Like an omerta, almost. Plus, a real distrust of outside authority, especially the feds. So the Cornbread Mafia wasn't starting from zero. They were adapting an existing system for a new product. This cultural foundation, plus the isolation of the Knobs region. It gave them a massive head start. And secrecy.
So it sounds like it wasn't just cultural familiarity then, but almost like a generational skill set in staying hidden. Were the methods actually similar, or was it more just the attitude?
Oh, it was definitely both. That's a really key point. The practical skills, knowing when to plant, how to avoid aerial surveillance, using the terrain for cover. That came directly from generations of making illegal whiskey. But maybe even more important was the mindset, that shared secret, that collective defiance of the law, and the absolute rule that community loyalty trumps legal stuff. This us versus them view was just baked in. It made their whole cannabis operation incredibly tough for outsiders to crack. They basically had the blueprint for illegal business in their DNA.
Right. And for a long time, it stayed just that, didn't it? A local secret, maybe whispers in the cornfields. But the real bombshell came when it went public. And this wasn't just a few arrests. The scale of what they found really changed the game for domestic crime. It was June 1989. U.S. Attorney Cleve Gambill stands up and gives them the name everyone remembers, the Cornbread Mafia. And what happened next as the authorities started figuring out just how big this thing was, it's pretty mind-blowing. This wasn't some small-time bust. The Department of Justice actually called it the largest domestic marijuana syndicate in U.S. history. Over 60 Kentuckians indicted. It sent shockwaves. Made it clear how far their reach had gone, way beyond those quiet Kentucky hills.
Yeah, and that really raises a key question, doesn't it? How did an operation starting so locally, hidden away in rural Kentucky, get that big, nationally recognized, before it all came crashing down? It wasn't sudden. It was a very calculated strategic expansion. They knew to grow bigger, they had to move outside Kentucky, avoid getting too concentrated, too noticeable. So they shifted from this tight local secret to this huge multi-state network, setting up new grow sites methodically. But that growth, while essential for them, inevitably brought the kind of major federal attention. Well, that kind of attention leads to a massive public crackdown like this one. Their success kind of sowed the seeds of their public exposure.
And when we talk about that growth, their methods were just incredibly clever. This wasn't sloppy work. Their tactics were seriously ingenious, starting with this cornfield camouflage. The idea was simple but brilliant. They'd lease or buy farms in other states, picking places that were, discreet. Then they planted the cannabis right inside the rows of corn. Can you imagine trying to spot that from the ground or even from a plane? Very difficult. And if things got hot, if law enforcement started sniffing around, the plan was even simpler. Just walk away. Abandon the farm. Let it default. Made it super hard to actually pin charges on specific people. It was remarkably low risk for such high potential rewards.
Right. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, this whole cornfield camouflage thing was carried out by something even more impressive, their roaming crews.
Yeah.
And these weren't just a few guys. They were seasonal teams, mostly from central Kentucky. The source describes them as operating like a traveling army, which is quite a phrase. These crews moved with almost military precision, farm to farm across 9 states, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin. Think about the logistics. Just managing that is staggering. They were paid daily, given housing, food kept them loyal and efficient. This whole mobile, super organized system let them run huge, spread out operations while keeping individual risk pretty low. It balanced secrecy with, well, enormous scale.
And the organization, the sheer cleverness went beyond just growing, right? Their security was kind of the stuff of legend. Some of their grow sites apparently used exotic animals for protection. I mean, think about it. Not just guard dogs. We're talking bears. And in some documented cases, even actual lions, full-grown lions. Imagine being an agent stumbling onto a pot farm guarded by a lion. Definitely adds this unforgettable, almost mythical quality to it all.
Absolutely. And beyond the literal lions and bears, their real security weapon was the people, the code of silence. Federal agents said over and over they just hit walls trying to flip members. People would not talk. And it wasn't just fear, though I'm sure that was part of it. It was this deep sense of shared identity, mutual protection, rooted in those community and family bonds we talked about earlier. This incredible loyalty basically kept the big kingpin charges, those major federal indictments, targeting the top guys out of reach for a really long time. It wasn't just a typical challenge for law enforcement. It was this unique, deeply cultural barrier that made getting inside information incredibly hard and slow.
But how long could that loyalty hold up? With that kind of federal pressure, you'd think eventually those bonds would start to fray.
You'd think so, absolutely. And in a lot of criminal groups, that's exactly what happens. People cut deals. But what seemed different here with the Cornbread Mafia was that deep-seated community trust. Now, sure, some people eventually did cooperate, likely to get reduced sentences, that happens. But the core loyalty, especially loyalty to the main figures, it stayed remarkably strong for a long time. It really speaks volumes about those pre-existing social structures, that whole us versus them thing. It took a huge amount of federal resources and time just to start making cracks, which really underlines how strong that internal code was.
And the scale, once they did start cracking it, it just beggars belief, really. By the late 1980s, their operations covered those 9 states we listed. That's a massive area. Most legitimate companies would find that challenging to manage, let alone an illegal one. And just to give you a sense of how immense this was, get this, a single raid back in 1987 in New York Mills, Minnesota, it tied one guy, Johnny Boone, to 48 tons of cannabis. Let that sink in. 48 tons from one raid linked to one person. That's enough to fill multiple semi-trucks. It wasn't just a big bust. It was industrial scale.
And when you connect the dots across their whole network, it's even more staggering. By 1989, authorities had linked a total of 182 tons of seized marijuana directly to the syndicate. The estimated street value, around $350 million. Back then, I mean, just think about that number in late 80s dollars. It was completely unprecedented for domestic marijuana growing. The main guys named in those big indictments, the ones who became the faces of this empire, were Johnny Boone, Bobby Joe Red Eye Shoemaker, and James Harold Elder. What really stands out to you about that sheer audacity, the scope of it all, especially coming from those humble beginnings, the numbers just paint this picture of an empire built literally on corn and cannabis.
They really do. And at the center of it all, the one person who really became the face, the legend of the Cornbread Mafia, was Johnny Boone. He got the nickname Godfather of Grass. And his personal story, the guy who embodied the whole thing, it's a saga in itself. Just his legal history is wild.
Yeah.
After that huge Minnesota bust in 87, he did 20 years in federal prison. That wasn't the end. Nope. In 2008, after he got out, they caught him again, this time with over 1,000 plants on another farm. But instead of facing another long sentence, he just vanished, took off, went on the run for 8 years, became one of America's most wanted fugitives. They finally caught him near Montreal in 2016, just living quietly in Canada. He ended up pleading guilty in 2018, did 57 months, and got out in 2020. Just his ability to disappear for that long, crossing borders, it totally cemented his legendary status.
Oh, absolutely. The tenacity, the legend around Boone, it's undeniable. His repeated involvement, the fact that he could apparently still orchestrate things after prison, and in that long escape, it just built up this whole outlaw lore around him. He wasn't just seen as a criminal. To some, he became this kind of folk hero, this symbol of defiance and resourcefulness. His knack for adapting, surviving, even thriving for a while outside the law made him this really captivating figure. Even for the people trying to catch him, you have to imagine. He truly became the symbol of the Cornbread Mafia's resilience, its whole spirit of operating outside the rules.
And the story of Johnny Boone, his extraordinary life, it kept going right up until just recently, marking the end of a real American outlaw tale. Johnny Boone, the godfather of grass, he passed away on June 14th, 2024. He was 80 years old. His name, like we've been saying, just became totally synonymous with the Cornbread Mafia, written into American crime history.
So, what does it all mean looking back? The legacy of the Cornbread Mafia, it's significant. What started, as the source puts it, in cornrows and silence, using that local know-how and those tight community bonds. It didn't just become a huge business, it really did grow into outlaw lore. It'll always be remembered, and correctly so, as the largest pot-growing ring the U.S. had ever seen. It's a testament to community power, ingenuity, even if used illegally, and it shows the unique challenges law enforcement faces when a whole culture, in a way, is aligned against them. It's just this powerful story of how local conditions can explode onto the national stage.
It really is an incredible journey when you map it out from those quiet, isolated Kentucky farms, using those deep cultural roots, building this multi-state criminal empire. The cleverness of the cornfield camouflage, the power of that code of silence, and just the sheer scale of it all, it really sets the Cornbread Mafia apart in the history books. It's such a vivid example of how culture, geography, and ambition can mix to create something totally unexpected right under everyone's noses.
And maybe this raises an important question for you listening right now. In what ways does this story, the story of the Cornbread Mafia, make you rethink how we understand community? Or entrepreneurship, or even law enforcement, especially as laws around cannabis change? It makes you think about all those complex factors, the economic pressures back then, the cultural patterns that were already there, the sheer nerve involved, all the things that allowed something like this to not just start, but to thrive on such a massive scale, hidden in plain sight for so long. Makes you wonder, what other hidden stories of adaptation and ingenuity are still out there, waiting to be told?